setups required for a global HR, and it's time to test the setups. And all we had to do was, yes, we have done all these setups over the past few days. And all we have to do now is, yes, we also created a position yesterday, and we did discuss all of these options in the Manage Enterprise HCM Information session itself. And when you make some changes to a position, right, so you can go ahead and run this job so that all the positions, so that all the changes that you have done in the position would be applied in the application. Okay, so there is a job called Initialize Position Synchronization. You can run that job in case you've made any changes to the position. And when you do that, if the position sync is enabled, all the changes that you have done on a position gets applied to the assignment. Okay, and now what we have to do is, yes, before we hire an employee, see, we did create a position yesterday, and all we have to do is we need to set up a position synchronization first and do a couple of pre-checks before we hire an employee. I'm logged into ETAJ instance as HCM implementation user. And let's go back to the position that we have created and go from my client group, workforce structures. So we need to go to manage legal entity HCM information. So I go to setup and maintenance. Go to the legal entity that we have created. And we're going to set up the position sync. So currently it says use whatever position synchronization options available in enterprise, but we don't know what setup is done there. But what we do is, at least for our legal entity, we set up a position sync the way we want it. We say correct. Enable position sync, yes. Use position manager. Or you also have, we don't have position hierarchy or position trees anymore. And you can select all of these options that you want to default from a position onto the assignment record. So whenever you hire an employee, we're going to hire an employee in the next 10-15 minutes. And when we hire an employee in the assignment tab, we're going to select the position. And since we are enabling position sync, all these details that you entered on a position will be defaulted onto the assignment record. Go ahead and submit it. And let's also look at the position that we have created. I'll also keep that open. Go to workforce structures. There you should be able to see the position and other aspects. So we created this position yesterday, and we enabled position sync on the legal entity HCM information. So we created this position sync yesterday. We enabled position sync at the legal entity level, and this would take precedence. And all we need to do is go ahead and hire an employee now. Okay. And we'll go back. And before we hire an employee, there are a couple of things that we have to check, a couple of pre-checks. Because when you hire an employee, right, let me also tell you why you have to do those checks. If you hire a new employee, so this is like you validating all the setups that you have done in the global HR. So you go to hire an employee page. And you fill in all the information in these 5 tabs, and then you go ahead and submit it for an employee to be created. And it would take at least 10 minutes for us to discuss and enter the details in all these forms. Of course, more than 10 minutes, so 15, 20 minutes. And the last thing you want to do is see an error message when you hit the submit button. There could be 2 reasons why employee might not be created. One reason could be that, yes, you see a person number, it has been set as generated automatically. Now, the problem with this is, let me also take you to a person number generation method. If I take you to Enterprise HCM Information tab, so if you go to Manage Enterprise HCM Information tab, in this particular tab, you mention, okay, in this particular tab, you mention what is going to be the person number generation method. What is going to be the person number generation method? And here, if you see here, the person number generation method is blank. So which means if it is blank, it will automatically take it as automatic. So the default option that would be selected would be automatic. And the problem would be that when I submit a record, yes, a system will try to generate a person number and try to save employee with that person number. But since this is a demo instance, right, you and me are practicing Fusion functional configurations. There might be another technical consultant who might be practicing HCM data loader, and they might have loaded employees into the application using HDL template. In such scenarios, what would happen? In such scenarios, yes, the person number that is generated when we by the application automatically, that might clash with the person number that already exists. So someone would have loaded employees from with person number 1 to 5,000, and assume that the person number sequence is at 200 now or 250. When I do a submission, the next employee person number that would be generated would be 251. But there is already an employee with a person number 251 in the application. So you get an error saying that, first, there is already an employee with person number. Sorry, I cannot save the employee record, or I cannot submit this request. So to avoid that error, what we do is we will change the person number generation method to manual here. So that what we do is we can enter a unique manual number, and we don't run into the issue that I just mentioned. Now you set it to manual when you do the test in demo application, but in real time, what would be the option that would be selected? In real time, it would be automatic upon final save. This would be the option that would be selected, and which means a number would be generated automatically upon final save of the record on submission of the record. And you will be setting up an initial person number. You ask your Fusion technical consultant, HCM technical consultant, boss, let me know the maximum person number that you have loaded. So he would have loaded employees, right? So you ask him to get the maximum person number that he has loaded. If he has loaded 138465 employees in the application, okay, and this is an employee with the highest number in the application at the moment. Let's say there are 138,465 employees that the employee has currently, or client has currently, and all of them were loaded into Fusion application. Then what do? You set the initial person number as 138466 and leave this as automatic. And nobody is going to touch these settings. Nobody is going to touch these settings afterwards. But since it is a demo instance, nobody knows who changes this, when, and to what values. So since we have very less control here, so this would be the real time. a scenario, you select automatic upon final save, and you can get the maximum person number for all PPDF table, and you can put it in here. If you're not well versed with SQL, you can ask your Fusion Tech consultant to get this value for you. After we do a BAP report, you understand how to run basic queries in the application. Okay, so for now, what do I do? Instead, I don't want to write the SQL and populate the value here. Instead, I'll take a simpler approach. I'll select it as manual so that application lets me enter the person number manually. So this is one thing you need to take care of. Not that you will run into error, but after spending 20 minutes, you see that error, which could be frustrating, right? So this is one thing you have to take care of. And another thing that you have to take care of is any transaction you do in the application. We're going to talk about approvals in quite detail in in the next couple of sessions. Yes, for any process or for most of the process in HCM or for most of the transactions that you do in HCM, if I have to put it that way, you can enable or disable approvals, enable or bypass approvals. And if you enable approvals, you can also decide how many levels of approval you want to use, whom do you want to use as approvers, etc. So we're going to talk about all of those permutations and combinations in the workflow approval session. So we are trying to hire an employee here, right? So your colleague might be creating a job and a friend of his might be creating a position. So all these are nothing but transactions, a sort of transactions or configurations that you're doing in application. And you would be submitting a request for that to be created. Here you would submit a request for employee to be created. So your colleague might be submitting a request to create a job. So whether for this particular request or whether this request should be run through approval cycle or not, you set it up in the application. Okay, and where do you set it up from? You would be setting it up from a transaction console. You go to tools. Under tools, you have transaction console. And you go to approval rules. And here you will be able to see all those HCM process, not just HCM, you will also see a finance and other process as well. So you see add non-worker, add contingent worker, pending worker. These are other types of employees that we have. We'll talk about them if time permits today or in the next session. And if you search for create, remember you have many processes for a creation, create job, create grade, create job, create location, create position. So whenever you do any of these creation operations or addition, or whenever you hire an employee, right? So for all these, what are all these? These are all the workflow process given by Oracle. And for a given process, you can decide whether you want to bypass approvals in the application or enable it. So if this is enabled, so you see this, it is not ticked, right? So if it is ticked, means it will be in blue color. It is not ticked. What does it mean that it is not ticked? Which means bypass approvals is not ticked, which means approvals are enabled. Any request you submit for hiring an employee, it would go through the approvals. Approvals are not bypassed. And whom will it go for approval? Will depend on the rules configured in this rule section. Will depend on rules configured in this rule section. So when we do the workflow approvals, we will do around 10 transactions to understand various options available here. Okay. And what we do is for now, my concern is, yes, I want to submit a request to create an employee and I don't want it to get stuck in approval chain. So what I do is so you see this approval rules. So you write rules like this one, if then else rules, if then rules. And in the then clause, we have an option to use variety of approvals. So we'll be spending at least 1 to 1.5 hour sessions on this particular screen itself, and this would be our next topic. So for now, I just come out of it, and I'll bypass approval so that when I submit a request, the request doesn't get stuck in the approval chain, but it gets approved or employee gets hired in the application automatically. Okay, so I have everything set up now. Enterprise HCM information tab, I said, yes, person number manual, approval rules, I bypassed approvals. position created, and I have also position sync enabled. Now I'll log into the application from a different browser just to keep this open. And we'll test the configuration by hiring an employee. And I can pick up the credentials from the Fusion Cloud Google Sheet, Fusion Cloud instance link in the Google Drive. Okay, I think I've knocked off the ETAJ credentials. Just give me one moment, guys. My text editor has stopped responding. Does anyone have a ETAJ credentials with you handy, or I can get it from the browser as well? Or let me do it this way. Let me get it from browser, and I'll also put it here. Just give me one moment, guys. I'll share my screen back. Okay, I'll just give it a try. Just give me one more minute, guys. I'll be right back. Well, yeah, I've pulled out the password for ETAJ instance that we have been using. I think I've overwritten it earlier when we've got a new instance, but this is still working. So I'll also put this here and put it in green. So this is also accessible. Okay, and what we do is, yes, we go back now. I've logged into HCM implement, logged into the same session here. And what we do is, yes, from this particular session, we'll try to hire an employee. And to hire an employee, what you have to do, you just have to go into a new hire page, hire an employee. And remember, you need to mention a date when the employee is going to start working for you. Mention a hire date. You can stick to the system date. System date would default here. And the hire action would be, yes, what actions would you see here? The hire is a standard one given by Oracle. UG11 hire is a custom one that we have added. So in case you want to expand the list of actions or reasons given in any particular screen, you know what you have to do, right? You just have to go to manage actions, action reasons, create a new action, create a new reason, and link the reason to the action. So if you say hire, you get to see only hire to fill a vacant position. And if you select UG hire, the reasons list of value will get filtered based on action. So you click on the drop down, you see two reasons there. And remember, these are the two reasons that we have created and attach it to this particular action. So I'll say UG11 hire to fill a vacant position or emergency hire. So how will this help? This would help you from reporting standpoint. If you want to figure out tomorrow, how many specific actions have you done in the application, it would be quite easy for you to pull that information out. And yes, I want to hire employee into our legal entity that we have created. And remember, for you to see your legal entity here, what is it that you need to enable on the legal entity configuration? There is a legal employer checkbox that you need to tick. There is a legal employer checkbox that you need to tick. Hopefully, I don't have to go in there again. But if you go to a legal entity setup, I'll just keep that open as well. I'm sure most of you remember it, but just in case anybody forgets it. After you create a legal entity, you need to mark it as legal employer. Only the legal entities which are marked as legal employers would be visible in the dropdown. And since we have marked our legal entity as a legal employer, I'm able to see it here. And you need to enter the person number. Remember earlier it said generated automatically. Now you see a manual checkbox, right? That's because we have changed the person number generation method to manual in the Enterprise HCM information tab. So you can enter a person number. So I'll enter a random number. And let me also quickly verify if you already have an employee with that number in the application, just to avoid last minute surprises. And how do you verify if you already have an employee with that number or not? Go to my client groups, person management, and see if you have an employee with that number. 138466. This is the number that I'm using. And I search the application with that number. We don't have an employee with it, so I can safely use this. I don't get an error related to person number. And I can enter the first name and the last name. And I'll say John Doe. I'll say UG11, John Doe. And you can enter the title depending on the gender and whatever is appropriate. You can enter the prefix, suffix, middle name, etc., or preferred name. So few name information that's available, or a local name. And you can enter gender and date of birth. Remember, you see a gender and date of birth as purely optional fields here, right? So yes, when you hire an employee, you can choose not to fill it in. But when you try to run a payroll, right, we'll see that in the payroll as well. I'll refer back to this. When you run a payroll, if you're trying to pay an employee who doesn't have gender or date of birth, payroll application is going to throw an error, even though it's optional. So do bear that in mind. So I'll say it's male and 11, maybe I say 90 is the date of birth. I picked up a random date of birth. And there are a few DFF fields that students have enabled here. So we can ignore them. And we need to enter in the first screen, you enter the person identification information, like what is his name information and what is his ID. So since we are hiring this person in US, because remember the legal employer has an address attached, and that is a US address that we attached. Since it's a US address, you see the country getting defaulted to US. And the national identification number that you enter would be SSN, and you can mention a specific ID. I've also given some sample information that you can use to hire an employee. You can use this. Click on next. And in the next screen, you enter the person address information, like what exactly is a home address of a person, and you know where these fields are driven from, right? So to a country, there is an address tag attached, and that drives the fields. So yes, I go ahead and search for a specific PIN code. I think I also given a PIN code that you can use. Search for directly. And that would default the state, a county, and city. And I'll just say, yeah. And in the address line, when you will actually enter the actual address line one of the employee. So you capture the employee home address, and here you capture the employee phone number, primary phone number, email address, and this would be used for communication later on. And you can enter some legislative information here. Like you can mention whether the person is married or not. And if the person is married, you can scroll down and if you scroll down, you see an option to add a contacts here. And you can add the contacts of an employee here. Like you can add his spouse, you can add his child's, right? So you have various options whom you can add as contacts here. Okay, and you also have a citizenship and visa information. So this would help you to capture whatever citizenship or visas or valid visas that an employee holds. And if it's probably an IT consulting company, and when they want, when they're looking for employee who can travel to maybe a specific country, to UK, then in that case, what do? They come into the application, run a query, and see who has a valid visas for UK, and they can probably reach out to them and see if they are interested. So yes, capture the citizenship and visa information if required. Remember, when you fill in the information, who has an employee in the application? So whatever we're going to do, or whatever we'll be doing in today's session and probably tomorrow, this is like administering the HR application. So your job, your and mine job would end after you set up this configurations. You hand over the system to the client and ask them to use it. So it would be the client HR specialist who would be using the configurations that you have done to hire the people. So we are doing this process just to verify if the setups are working, but who in real time would be doing this? Are we supposed to do it? We are not supposed to hire employees for a client. It would be their HR specialist who would be doing it with the configurations that we used. And we are just smoke testing testing the configurations that we have done so far. Okay, please don't make a mistake that don't assume that you're going to do all this in real time as well. Just click on next. And you can enter a business unit number here. Sorry, the business unit. And now in this particular screen, this is an important screen where you enter employment related information. Meaning if you have any work relationship or INN details, since this is specific to US. So if you want to capture some information related to these fields, you capture it. And the most important part is here. So this is where you create an assignment. And yes, when you hire a person, you hire him into a specific legal employer. A legal employer would hire an employee, and they would want an employee to work in a specific BU, in a specific job position, grade, and a department. Right. So assignment would be created here, and the first thing that you have to do is to select a business unit in which you want to create an assignment. So I want to create it in a UG11 sales business unit. So I select UG11 sales here. And the moment you select a business unit, remember, you see a wheel spinning for a moment. And what could happen with this is the moment you select a business unit, the list of values that would be available in all these drop downs would change, especially job, grade, department, and location, right? So these 4 business objects are controlled by reference data set. So the list of values that would be available in these drop downs would change based on the business unit that you are selecting. So since I selected UG11 here, UG11 sales BU, okay, let me pick this one up and let me take you to a couple of screens first. I'll tell you what the application will do whenever you select a particular business unit here. The moment you select a specific business unit there, Oracle will come into this specific set of tasks that I'm going to show you. Okay, it is going to come into a business unit set assignment screen. I go to organizations, I change it to all tasks. So it is going to come into this particular task, manage business unit set assignment. And remember, UG11 sales BU is set as a scope. So application will come into this particular task, set up UG11 as a scope, and it would search for a job reference data object, and it would see what is the reference data set attached. And what is the reference data set attached here? UG11 sales, right? Now, if it is, now in this particular screen, remember you see all the configurations, financials, HCM, etc. And for each configuration, you attach a common reference data set or you attach a custom reference data set. If it is common, then you will be able to see only the configurations assigned to common reference data set. And if it is any custom reference data set, then how does it work? You will see whatever has been assigned to common, whatever jobs have been created and assigned to common reference data set, plus whatever jobs have been assigned to UG11 sales. Remember, we created a job called UG11 sales executive, right? And we attached it only to UG11 sales RDS. We attached it to UG11 sales RDS. And that UG11 sales reference data set is assigned here for the jobs in this PO. So which means, so it comes here. The moment you select a business unit, it comes into this screen. For jobs, it sees that you have a custom reference data set assigned. So it will see how many jobs are assigned to this RDS. I think we created 2 jobs and assigned, right? Senior UG11 sales executive, UG11 senior sales executive. I think we created them as grades, I believe, not the job. And we created at least 1 job called UG11 sales executive. And that particular job is assigned to this RDS. So yes, you will be able to see the job. Of course, you would be able to see the job, but apart from that job, you will be able to see many other seeded jobs given by Oracle. You will be able to see many other jobs assigned to a common set. Okay, I'm stressing it for one final time. Whenever you see a custom reference data set assigned, don't think that you will see only the jobs assigned to this RDS. That's not how it works. So if you have 100 jobs assigned to common set, and if you have 1 job assigned to UG11, how many jobs will you see in the dropdown when you select a UG11 business unit in the assignment screen? Is it 100 or 1 or 101? It is going to be 101. Okay, so if it's a custom, it is a common plus all the jobs assigned to custom reference data set. So that is why the moment you say UG11 here, you will be able to see all the UG11 configurations that you did on the job. Great. I should be able to see the department as well. Right, you see, I see the department, and I should also be able to see the location as well. Right, so why am I seeing all this? Because I selected UG11 here, and for these 4 reference data objects, I selected custom reference data set to which I assign those jobs, grades, departments, and locations. Now let me do one thing. Let me change it to US1 business unit, and let me show you how exactly it works. So I change it to US1 BU. Now then, how does it work? So the moment I select US1 BU, the LOVs get refreshed again. And if I search for UG11 here, will I be able to find that job? What does it say? It says, sorry boss, I don't see any job that starts with UG11 in the reference data set attached to this business unit or in the jobs that are accessible from this PU. Okay, so that's exactly how a reference data set can be used to share the configuration or restrict the configuration to a specific PU. And if you search for, now we go back and change it to UG sales PU. And the assignment status is going to be active payroll eligible, which means, yes, this is an active employee that I'm hiring and he is eligible for payroll. Okay. And you need to select a position here. And what position are we going to select? We are going to select the position that we have created here. UG11 sales executive, and how many open positions I created? Headcount 100, right? So I select UG11 sales executive here, sales executive position. And the moment I select UG11 sales executive position, what would happen? Since the position sync is enabled on UG11 legal entity, all these attributes have been defaulted from the position. Since the position sync is enabled at the legal entity HCM information level, all these attributes from a position configuration, from the position configuration, business unit, name, code, department, etc., have been picked up and they have been defaulted onto the assignment. And remember, we also said allow override assignment, right? So that's why you are seeing an option called synchronized composition. If it will be yes by default, which means these fields would be read only. But since you have allowed HR specialist an option to override it at the assignment level, I can change it to no. And the moment I change it to no, what would happen? Yes, the fields become editable. The defaulted values would still remain, but they become editable and I can change them. So as an exception, if I want to hire someone into a position, but put him into a location which is different from the location attached to position, I can do it this way. Or I can change it back to yes. Well, what is the benefit of using positions in HCM? Position sync. The way it benefits is, let's say you have 100 employees in the sales executive position. And assume that sales executives team is based out of New York today, and tomorrow you're moving them to Chicago, or the team is moving to Chicago. So if you have to capture that change in the application, if you don't enable position sync, then you have to go to 100 employee assignment records. You have to correct the location from New York to Chicago. But since you are using a position sync here, the moment a location changes, you just go into position, you edit the position here, you edit the position here, and you change the location from UG11 New York to Chicago, and you run that sync a position job. You run that synchronized position job that I've just shown you in the beginning of the session, and that would pick up all the 100 assignments which are using this position. It would update location on those 100 assignments from New York to Chicago. That's how it works. So that's how a position sync would be helpful. And if you scroll down, you will be able to see all the information. So you pick up the grade. I'll pick up sales executive. And you can fill in, so what information you have. So yes, this is a position, job, grade, department, location, work from home, working at home, no. Worker category, you can mention what type of a worker he is. This is an optional configuration, and the assignment category. So is it a full-time job, regular assignment, or you have got few options, full-time, temporary, part-time, temporary. So you have various combinations available. And is he a manager? Yes or no, you select that here. And if you're hiring a manager, you can also directly attach the reportees who are in the application to this manager directly when you're hiring him. So if you scroll down, you have an option to tag the reportees as well directly. And you can mention whether it is whether he is a salaried or a hourly payment that you make to this particular employee. If he is a salaried employee, you select salaried class, and in the next screen, you're going to enter the salary basis. You mentioned the working hours, 40 working hours weekly, 8 days per week, and it's a full-time, one full-time equivalent. So this employee is going to work full-time for you, right? And you scroll up a little bit, and you've got some optional information here. Like what's the work timings that this employee follows? Remember, the work timing of employee will take precedence over everything else. So you have work timings at 4 levels. At assignment level, you have it mentioned at a department level, and you have it mentioned at legal entity level, and you have it at enterprise level. Enterprise, legal entity, department, and employee. So you have work timings captured at 4 levels, and it goes up. So this would take precedence. After that, a department, after that, a legal entity, and after that, enterprise. And you've got some other attributes, the start date, end dates that you can enter or skip. And you also have people group flex field. Remember, you know how this works, right? So this is a key flex field which you can use to capture or group people together based on a custom criteria. And if you scroll down here, you do have an option to add a manager. So if you want to add a manager to this specific employee, you can do that. Let's go ahead and add Swift Linda as a manager for this employee, a fictional employee in the application. And yes, he is a line manager. If you want to add another project manager, you can do that as well. And these are the different types of managers you can add to a specific employee. And you can also mention the probation and notice period. So if the probation is 1 month, you say 1 month here, 1 month. And the notice period is 2 months, you say notice period is 2 months. And everybody understands what a probation period is, right? So first 1 month, your employment will not be confirmed. So it's like they are trying to probe you to understand if you are the right fit for them or not. Okay, so I'll take this off. Keep it blank. And if you are hiring an employee as a manager, you can add direct reports directly here. So you can go ahead and click on select and add. This would give you an option to search for the employees, and you can add them as reportees directly here. And you have a payroll details section. We'll talk about the payroll details when we do the payroll module. So which payroll do you want to use to pay this particular employee? So all that information goes into a payroll details section. And we'll not talk about it now. We'll talk about it when we go to the payroll module. And if this employee is going to be part of any trade union, and if collective agreements or have been created in the application, you can tag that collective agreement or link him up with the union as well. And all we have to do is go to the next screen, compensation and information, other information. And this is where you're going to select the salary basis that we have created and create and select an employee. So you select UG11. A UG11 annual salary. And the moment you select the annual salary, in the previous screen, what did we select? In the previous screen, in the employment screen, we selected a grade. And what's the grade that we selected? Sales executive. And what is the rate that we selected for this particular grade? In the grade rate, remember we created this grade yesterday. Along with this grade, we created one other grade as well. Sales executive, senior sales executive. Sales executive rate is 40 to 60,000 USD. Senior sales it's 60 to 80, right? And since we have used this grade in the employment information tab, when you come into salary, for that particular grade, in this particular salary basis, the salary range assigned is 40 to 60. And if I try to give him a $70,000, maybe I don't know the range or I probably overlooked it, then you get a warning message which says you entered a salary amount that falls outside of the range. Where exactly is this coming from? Let me show you that real quick. I just want to show you how the bits link up together. I think we don't have salary basis here. Let's do it in compensation management. And here you search for UG11. And if you edit it, you get to see the configurations that you have done. Right, we mentioned that if you go to salary ranges, so we have assigned this grade rate, and for sales executive grade, this is a minimum and the maximum that we mentioned. Okay, so that is how this minimum maximum is getting derived based on a grade that you selected. For this grade, this is the values that you mentioned. And you also mentioned a salary range violation behavior in the salary basis. And here we said one. So meaning if you try to assign a salary which is outside of a range, meaning less than 40,000 or more than 60,000, that's exactly I've done here. More than 60,000 is what I entered. I get a warning message as that's an option that I selected here. And what does it say? It just says that salary amount falls outside of the salary range. I can choose to ignore it since it's a warning, and I can still go ahead and save the employee with 70,000. But if you don't want your employee to be able to proceed with it, you select error. If you don't even want to show that warning message, you can say LO. LO means you will not even get a warning. Warning means it will just warn the HR specialist. Error means it doesn't let HR specialist proceed further. Okay, you can decide what sort of behavior you want. Say, for example, I want to hire him at 60,000. So I say 60,000, it's not a violation. And remember, whenever you hire an employee, the user gets created in the application automatically. And you can also set up automatic role provisioning rules. And from those role provisioning rules, you can mention, depending on certain rules, what roles should be added automatically to a specific user. You can say that any employee had assign employee role. And if it is a sales executive, if you are hiring an employee into a job family of sales, you can probably assign them sales analyst and sales representative job roles as well. So you can set up roles and auto provisioning rules, and that would drive what roles would get assigned to the particular user when you hire an employee. So you go to the next screen. You can review all the information in this, and then you go ahead and save the employee. Okay, so you can review all the details, go ahead and submit it. Okay, so what does it say? It says the request would be submitted. Do you want to continue? So should this request go through approval cycle or not? It depends on whether the approvals are enabled in the transaction console or not for hire an employee. Okay, so it says a request was submitted. And we'll just say click on OK. And now to look at that person created or employee created, I can go back, go to person management screen. I should be able to search for that employee. 138466. You should be able to see the employee here, created with all the information. And all the information that you entered in all those 5 tabs would be available in this particular screen when you open up a person record. And when you open up a person record, you will see the employment information, whatever you entered in a 3rd tab. And if you click on the task ribbon, you will be able to see various options here. So if you want to see the person name information, you can go in here. If you want to see the direct reports of a person, you go in here. If you want to see what is the user created for this particular employee, you can go in here. And you will be able to see all the details and the assignment, right? So when we created assignment, we didn't give any name or we didn't mention number, right? So the name would be the same as that of a job. Whatever is the job name, that would become a name of an assignment. And the assignment number would be employee number followed by prefixed with E in case it is an employee that you've hired. And tomorrow we'll look at hiring different types of other employees like pending worker, contractor, etc. You would notice that if it's a contractor that you hire, the assignment number would be C. And you would be able to see all the details here. Any questions in what we have covered today? In tomorrow's session, what we do is we will see, we'll talk about the different types of other workers that we have. Okay, we'll talk about pending worker, contingent worker, non-worker, etc. And then if time permits, we will also look at a few other administrative actions that can be performed in the application by HR specialist. Okay, so we'll focus on the administration of HCM tomorrow, a global HR to be precise. Okay, thank you guys. See you tomorrow. Please do try to hire an employee at least using the configurations that I have done. In case you haven't created your configurations, that's fine. But at least get your hands dirty by using the configuration that I created. Try to hire an employee and see how the system is behaving. Okay. Thank you guys. See you tomorrow.